Hi, welcome back for Chapter 11, Section 3, Motion and Force. Here are the key ideas for today. What are the four fundamental forces in nature? How can forces affect the motion of an object? Why is friction sometimes necessary? Okay, so what are fundamental forces? Often you hear the word force used in everyday conversation. For example, our basketball team is an awesome force. What exactly is force? In science, force means any action that can affect the motion of an object, like velocity and acceleration. Force has both magnitude or size and direction. The four fundamental forces in nature. The four fundamental forces are gravity, the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. Okay, what are the properties of the fundamental force? Each of the four fundamental forces is similar in that they act to change the motions of objects. However, they have different properties and each works in a different way. The strong and weak nuclear forces act over only short distances. These are the forces that hold atoms together. The strong and weak nuclear forces are important, but you do not experience them directly in your everyday life. The force of gravity and electromagnetic forces are forces you feel every day. Gravity acts over long distances and pulls objects towards each other. Electromagnetic forces produce friction, magnetism, and static electricity. Let's do a reading check. How are the four fundamental forces similar? So let me see if I can write here like I'd done before. Okay, they um, they all act to change the motion the motion of objects. Okay, so let's look here. Let's look closer here. Let's see, maybe I can increase this a little bit. Okay, so we've talked about this before in the past. We have the Earth and we have the Moon. There's a gravitational pull from both the Earth and the Moon. It's just that the Earth is larger, so it has more pull on the Moon, but the Moon is still pulling on the Earth. Okay, so which fundamental force acts between Earth and the Moon? You guessed it right, gravity. All right. Okay, so the strong forces have different strengths. The strong nuclear force is the strongest of all forces. The strong nuclear force holds together the protons and neutrons in the nuclei of atoms. However, if it only acts over short distances, the maximum range of the strong nuclear force is about the size of an atomic nucleus. The weak nuclear force is about 10 trillion times weaker than the stronger nuclear force. The weak nuclear force affects some kinds of radioactive decay. Electromagnetic forces can act over long distances and are about 1% of the strength of the strong nuclear force. Electromagnetic forces hold electrons near the nucleus of an atom and hold molecules together. Gravity is the weakest of the fundamental forces. It is about 1/40th times weaker than the strong nuclear force. It also works over longer distances than any of the other fundamental forces. Gravity is an important force in shaping the structure of our galaxy and the universe. Okay, electromagnetic forces cause protons to repel each other. Why don't the nuclei of atoms fly apart due to this electromagnetic forces between the protons? Oh, okay, so let's do this. The strong nuclear force, the strong nuclear force holds the protons together. It is stronger than the electromagnetic magnetic force. Okay? All right. Contact forces and field forces. Okay? Scientists put forces into two main groups, contact forces and field forces. Contact forces require two objects to physically be in contact with each other. When you push or pull on an object, you are applying a contact force. Friction is another example of a contact force. Field forces act over distances and do not require two objects to be in direct contact. Gravity and magnetism are examples of field forces. Field forces can attract two objects together or push two objects apart. So, contact force affect. Okay, so let's see. Um, okay. Okay, let's see if you can still see this one. They affect only objects that are touching each other. Okay. And we talked about some of these examples. This is pushing. Hold on. This is when you are pushing or pulling an object. Pushing or object. And it's also friction. Okay. So this type of force is called field forces. Okay, so field forces act over distances, so they're not physically touching, they're acting over distances such as gravity and magnetism. Okay, does that make sense? If not, ask me later in class when I see you, okay? How can forces affect motion? Forces can change the motion of an object. In most situations, several forces act on an object at once. The net force is the combination of all these forces acting on an object. An object will accelerate in the direction of the net force. An object will not accelerate if the net force is zero. Okay, balanced forces. We've talked about some of this in the past. I hope you guys kind of remember. Balanced forces produce a net force of zero. Therefore, an object experiencing balanced force will not change its motion. This means an object's rest will remain at rest if the forces are balanced. An object in motion will remain in motion if the forces are balanced. Okay, reading check. Describe how do balanced forces affect an object's motion. Okay, so balanced forces do not change an object's motion. Okay, so there are many examples of balanced forces in daily life. A light hanging from the ceiling does not move up or down. The force of tension in the cord pulls the light up. That balances the force of gravity which pulls the light down. A car moving at a constant velocity is another example of an object affected by balance. So let's look at this. Here's force. In this picture, both people are pushing with the same force. They are pushing in opposite directions. Therefore, the forces are balanced and the couch does not move. In this picture, they're both on one side. So here the two people are pushing in the same direction. Therefore, the force is unbalanced and the couch moves. The couch moves in the direction of the net force. Okay, 6. Explain. Why does the couch move in the bottom picture but not in the picture in the top? Oops. Okay. in the bottom picture, the forces on the couch are unbalanced. Okay? Unbalanced forces. When the net force acting on an object is greater than 0, the object will accelerate in the direction of the net force. Look at the image of the two students pushing a couch above. When the two students are pushing on opposite sides of the couch, the forces oppose each other. If one student pushes harder, the couch will move in the direction that the student is pushing. When the two students are pushing on the same side of the couch, the forces combined. The couch accelerates in the direction both students are pushing. What happens if one student pushes the couch west and the other pushes the couch north? The net force is a combination of the two forces. The couch will move in a northwest direction. An object moves at a constant speed along a circular path. Is the object experiencing balanced or unbalanced forces? The The object's motion is changing. Therefore, it must be experiencing unbalanced forces. Okay? What is force of friction? Friction is a force that opposes the relative motion between two objects in contact. Friction results from electromagnetic forces. It occurs as a result of the interaction between atoms on the surface of two objects. The rougher the surfaces, the greater the friction between them. Identify which of the four fundamental forces cause friction. And that is the electromagnetic force. Okay? All right. If there is no friction between the match and the surface, would the match light? The match would not light if there were no friction. Because friction produces heat that causes the match to light. Okay? There is friction between the match head and the surface it moves against. The friction produces heat. The heat causes the match to catch on fire. Even surfaces that look or feel smooth are rough at the molecular level. Interactions between atoms and molecules produce friction, even between smooth surfaces. Types of friction. There are two main types of friction: kinetic friction and static friction. Kinetic friction is friction between two moving surfaces. There are two main types of kinetic friction: sliding friction and rolling friction. Sliding friction occurs when two objects slide past each other. Rolling friction occurs when a rolling object rolls over a flat surface. So it's rolling over a flat surface. Okay? In most cases, rolling friction is less than sliding friction. This is why it's easier to push a chair on wheels across the floor than a chair without wheels. List the two main types of kinetic friction that we just talked about: sliding and rolling. Okay? Static friction is the friction between two surfaces that are not sliding past each other. Forces act between molecules on the surface of two objects, holding them together. Static friction is usually greater than kinetic friction. Therefore, in most cases, it takes greater force to start an object moving than to keep it moving. How does friction impact everyday life? Friction allows you to hold a pencil and use it to write on a piece of paper. Friction even keeps you from slipping when you walk. Friction between the tires of a car and the road allows a car to move. As wheels of a car turn, they push against the road. As a result, the road pushes forward on the car. The forces push the car forward. The force pushing the car forward must be greater than the friction that opposes the motion of the car. Due to friction, a constant force must be applied to keep the car moving. Friction also keeps cars from moving when parked. Okay. The car's engine produces a forward force. Friction resists this force. When the forward force bounces the force of friction, the car's motion does not change. The car moves at a constant speed. Okay? The forward force is greater than the force of friction. The car's motion changes. The car accelerates forward. The force of gravity pulls the truck down the hill. Friction between the truck's wheels and the road resists the force of gravity. When the force of friction is equal to the force of gravity, the truck's motion does not change. The truck does not move. What would happen to the truck in the bottom picture if the force of gravity were larger than the force of friction? The truck would roll down the hill. Okay. Increasing and decreasing friction. Sometimes people need to decrease the friction between surfaces. For example, cars' engines have many moving parts. If there is too much friction between these parts, the engine can become too hot. Therefore, people add oil to their engines. Oil is a lubricant. It reduces the friction between surfaces. Let's define lubricant. Okay. Lubricant is a substance that reduces friction between surfaces. Okay, sometimes people need to increase the friction between surfaces. For example, people in cold climates may put sand on icy roads and sidewalks. The sand increases friction between the ground and people or cars moving on it. Okay, that is the end of our section today. Part of your homework is to finish the designing race cars, as well as your section review. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye.